I remember the nights when I thought resting meant just closing my eyes, sinking into the pillow, and expecting peace to rush in like a welcome tide. But instead, my mind was a relentless storm. Thoughts tumbled over one another, unfinished to-dos, worries curling tightly around the edges of my consciousness. My body lay still, yet every muscle screamed with a tension that refused to dissolve. I'd tell myself, just relax. You deserve this. Yet the silence wasn't soothing. It felt like a void I was desperate to fill. It's strange, isn't it? To be so utterly exhausted that the very idea of rest feels like a task, like another mountain I have to climb. I wasn't alone in this. I found myself watching others effortlessly sink into calm while I wrestled with the restless buzz inside me. No matter how deeply I wanted peace, it seemed to slip further away, like trying to grasp water with open hands. The paradox was maddening. I was desperate to stop, to breathe, yet every moment spent resting became another reminder that peace was not coming. My body held tight, my thoughts refused shut down, and my heart raced beneath the stillness. I've often heard people say that peace comes when we slow down, when we prioritize rest. And yet, what if slowing down isn't actually enough? What if the battle I was fighting was underneath the surface, hidden, almost invisible, but fierce? Sometimes, I'd lay awake feeling the weight of guilt pressing down on me. Guilt for taking time for myself. Guilt for not being productive, for not doing more, for not pushing through. It was as if the very act of pausing betrayed some unspoken contract I had with myself to always keep moving, always keep striving. One afternoon, after another day full of mental noise and physical stiffness despite my attempts to relax, I found myself sitting still, really still, for the first time in a long while. I wasn't trying to will peace into existence. I just sat with what was. And in that space, a question surfaced, whispered but clear. What if peace isn't about the absence of activity or noise, but something deeper, something I hadn't yet invited into my experience? What if the rest I thought I was giving myself was only surface level, and my system was still on high alert beneath it all? I began noticing subtle signals, a tension that refused to meld away in moments that should have been calming, a relentless mental pace even during the quietest parts of the day, that nagging feeling that I should be doing something else, anything else. It was like my body and mind were stuck in a state of readiness, bracing for storms that never came. In those moments, I felt far from the peaceful rest I was chasing. We've all heard about relaxing, slowing down. Just breathe. Take a break. But when you've lived with this persistent restlessness, those phrases often feel like echoes from a place that's not truly connected to your current experience. They can even heighten frustration because they seem to point to a simple solution that you can't quite reach. I started wondering if what I was facing was something far more complex than just fatigue or busyness. It was as if the very machinery that should enable me to rest had been wound tight, conditioned to remain alert, even when my conscious mind wanted otherwise. This feeling of exhaustion mixed with restlessness is more than physical tiredness. It's an inner conflict, a tension between wanting peace and being unable to fully receive it. It's when your mind won't quiet, your body won't release, and your heart feels like it's running a marathon even at rest. And that's when rest becomes an illusion, something that looks easy from the outside but feels impossibly elusive from the inside. I know this struggle intimately because I lived it, and I want to share not just the recognition of that struggle, but a way to understand the subtle, often hidden signals that keep us stuck in this cycle. This isn't about pushing harder or trying to force peace. It's about noticing what's really happening beneath the surface, because peace, real peace, doesn't always come wrapped in silence and stillness. If you've ever felt like me, like the very act of resting has become a challenge, like your body and mind won't cooperate when you need them most, then this story is for you. There are signs, clear signals, that your anxiety might be quietly holding you hostage, keeping you from the restful moments you crave. And recognizing those signs is the first step towards something different, something kinder, more real. The journey ahead is about understanding what is really happening inside us when peace seems impossible. It's about learning to move beyond the surface frustration of restlessness toward a deeper sense of safety and ease within ourselves. What if resting isn't about stopping all movement, but about inviting our entire being, mind, body, heart, into a space of genuine calm? This is not just a story about exhaustion or struggle. It's a story about awakening to a new relationship with rest, one that doesn't shame us for wanting peace or blame us for feeling restless. It's about holding space for the complexity of our experience and discovering how to cultivate rest that truly nourishes and restores. As we begin this journey together, I invite you to hold your own experience gently. There is no shame in the difficulty of resting, only the courageous recognition that something within you is ready for a different kind of peace. And that change, that shift, is both possible and within reach. I recall a particular afternoon when exhaustion finally compelled me to stop juggling the endless to-dos that filled my mind. As I sank into my chair, expecting relief, the chaotic hum inside only grew louder. It was as if my nervous system had rewired itself to remain alert, even in moments designed for repose. This wasn't simply a case of fatigue. It felt more like my body was a car engine idling in overdrive, humming too fast, even in neutral. I realized restlessness isn't just mental chatter. It's an entire physiological experience that ropes together unease, agitation, and a persistent call to action that leaves no room for stillness. There was a time when I believed rest was a straightforward pause, a blank page waiting for relaxation to write itself. Yet, I discovered restlessness lives in the subtle contractions of muscle memory and the unspoken refusal of my breath to deepen. A key insight came when I noticed that even minor muscles, my jaw, shoulders, held their guard up like sentinels, unwilling to relinquish control. This involuntary stiffness whispered a story of constant preparedness, a body waiting for a threat that wasn't there. I liken it now to a violin string pulled too tight, ready to snap, but never quite releasing its tension. One night, I overheard a conversation that illustrated exactly this cycle. My friend described lying awake while her thoughts raced, and despite her body aching for rest, every attempt to relax felt like wading through quicksand. Her description wasn't just familiar. It revealed a profound disconnect between her inner sensations and outward calm. This helped me see that restlessness isn't a character flaw or weakness. It's biology responding to hidden stressors, often unacknowledged, silently shaping our experience of stillness. Moreover, I came to understand that cultural myths about productivity and rest intensify this challenge. We're often told to push through or earn our breaks, which can twist rest into punishment, a luxury to feel guilty about rather than a necessity to embrace. Such beliefs can deepen the chasm between wanting to relax and feeling entitled to do so. I began questioning how much of my inability to find peace stemmed from this internalized narrative that rest was wasting time, pushing me further into tension rather than out of it. Another awakening happened during a simple walk in a forest near my home. As I observed the trees swaying gently, their movements purposeful yet fluid, I realized that nature's rest isn't about stopping movement entirely, but allowing rhythmic ebb and flow, an interplay between action and surrender. The forest didn't freeze to rest. It moved softly, with intention and grace. Translating this to myself, I saw that rest could too embrace a dynamic quality, not inert stillness, but a soothing balance between alertness and ease, where my system could lower its guard without switching off. Experiencing this helped me reframe moments of doing nothing as an active process of nurturing safety within, not a passive state demanding perfection. I experimented with brief, mindful pauses during my day, not to empty my mind, but to acknowledge the nervous system's need for recalibration. I'd catch myself holding breath or bracing shoulders, then deliberately soften those muscles, inviting release 1 inch at a time. It was like coaxing a wild animal to trust, gradually letting down its defenses and relaxing into connection. These small acts taught me that resting deeply requires patience and tender attention, not just shutting down thought. In recognizing that restlessness intertwined with an overactive survival response, I also began identifying specific triggers, both external and internal, that threw my system into overdrive. Whether an unexpected email, a loud noise, or a surge of self-critical thoughts, these stressors fan the flames of vigilance. One afternoon stands out when a single sharp tone from my phone triggered a cascade of physiological reaction. My chest tightened, breath shortened, and muscles stiffened instantly. It was a sharp reminder that restlessness isn't random. It often erupts from subtle alarms wired deep inside us, demanding recognition and compassionate engagement. I found that learning to intercept these triggers created openings for true relaxation. By cultivating awareness that rippled through body and mind, I stopped seeing agitation as something to fight or escape. Instead, I began treating it like a signpost, a clue guiding me to where my nervous system needed repair or soothing. This shift was transformative. It broke the cycle of frustration into collaborative care, where I became an ally rather than an adversary to my own rest. Now, picture yourself in a quiet moment where your muscles are waiting for relief, yet your mind resists slowing down. Imagine tuning into subtle bodily sensations, areas of tightness or shallow breath, and approaching them with curiosity rather than impatience. Picture this as a dance rather than a battle, where you welcome the parts of your being that feel wary or restless and gently ask, what do you need to feel safe enough to let go? This invitation nudges your nervous system away from constant vigilance toward profound relaxation. In many ways, learning to rest becomes an act of courage, facing the discomfort that arises when habitual tension unwinds, and stepping into vulnerability that may initially feel unfamiliar. Yet, within this courageous unfolding lies the possibility of not just fleeting calm, but deep, regenerative peace that revitalizes the entirety of who we are. It is a journey that unfolds through attentive presence to the intricate language of body and mind intertwined. There was a moment when I realized that my struggle with unwinding wasn't just caused by what I was doing or not doing, but deeply connected to how I perceived stillness itself. One afternoon, as I sat in my favorite chair, I grappled with an internal rush that felt almost like static electricity pulsing under my skin. My thoughts darted like frantic birds trapped in a small cage, and I fought the urge to leap up and move. At that precise moment, a phrase whispered inside me. Stillness is not inactivity, it is an invitation. That subtle change in perspective didn't erase the discomfort, but it unlocked a new way for me to approach those uneasy intervals. In those uneasy moments, I began to entertain the idea that agitation might be signaling a deeper yearning, a call toward reconnecting with parts of ourselves neglected or suppressed. Rest, I came to understand, often gets tangled up with the pressure to accomplish or improve, making it feel like an uncomfortable pause in productivity. But what if rest holds a different role? Perhaps it's a gentle gateway to emotional restoration rather than a forced reset button. For example, I found that when I allowed myself to experience moments of boredom or stillness without judgment, a curious transformation happened. The familiar tension loosened, and I started to meet myself with newfound compassion. One afternoon illustrates this vividly. I was sitting alone by a window, watching rain slowly tap against the glass. The rhythm was unhurried, steady, a kind of quiet persistence. As I observed the droplets, I felt an intense urge to distract myself from the moment, to break free from the inertia pressing on my chest. But instead of reaching for my phone or standing up, I held on to that impulse and leaned into it. Sitting with that urge felt awkward, almost rebellious, but as minutes passed, the demand for action softened. The sensation that something urgent had to be done began to dissolve, replaced by a warm sense of patience. It became clear that resistance often makes rest more difficult, but surrendering to discomfort opens a path forward. Moreover, I discovered the value of tuning into subtle sensory cues that go unnoticed in restless states. For instance, the way my feet connected with the floor or the subtle temperature of my skin. These micro-experiences served as entry points back into tranquility when my thoughts spiraled. I started practicing anchoring myself in this manner, like a sailor dropping anchor during turbulent seas to steady the vessel. Instead of pushing back against disquiet, I learned to observe the physical signals accompanying it, like tightness in the chest or shallow breathing, not as enemies but messengers guiding me toward what needed attention. I recall a night when sleep evaded me despite overwhelming tiredness. Instead of fighting the tossing and turning, I shifted focus onto the feeling of my blankets, their weight, softness, and warmth against my skin. Slowly, the mental chatter dimmed as I relaxed into the textures surrounding me. This tactical shift away from overthinking towards sensory presence became a tool I repeatedly returned to. The subtle art of attending to these concrete experiences fosters a transition into rest deeper than what mental effort alone could achieve. Another turning point arose when I recognized how the stories I told myself about rest influenced my ability to receive it. Early on, I thought that rest must look a particular way: stillness, silence, no thought. But this rigid blueprint made any internal disturbance feel like failure. Over time, I realized rest takes countless forms, and that its essence lies in allowing whatever arises without judgment. Rest can be a gentle sway, a quiet smile, or even a few deep breaths between moments of movement. This flexible understanding lightened the burden I placed on myself and invited a more fluid relationship with pause. I also found that embedding ritual into rest helped create a framework signaling it was safe to unwind. Lighting a candle, savoring a cup of tea, or playing soft music became acts of honoring the need to decelerate. These deliberate markers transformed rest from an open-ended command into a gracious pause, offering hands to guide me down from the cliff of over-alertness. When the mind demanded constant stimulation, these rituals worked as gentle invitations, coaxing a reluctant alertness into a softer, more expansive state. Conversations with close friends revealed how common it is to feel restless even when attempts to relax are plentiful. Shared stories about racing thoughts despite lying still, or feelings of obligation even in idle moments. Those exchanges reminded me that we often carry an unseen weight of expectation about what rest should be. It compelled me to cultivate honesty about my experience without self-criticism, discovering that openness about the struggle itself is restorative. Simply naming the tension lessened its grip, as if sunlight penetrating a dense fog. One vivid memory stands out. During a weekend getaway, nature's calm surrounded me: a quiet stream, trees swaying gently, birds chirping in the distance. Yet, inside, I battled mental whirling that refused to settle. Instead of dismissing this dissonance, I shared it with a companion walking beside me. Speaking aloud, the unrest unexpectedly released its hold, allowing space for a calm deeper than before. This taught me that acknowledging hesitation or impatience openly can be a powerful gateway to solace. In essence, what I learned is this: the path to genuine peace requires embracing discomfort as a natural companion rather than its opposite. Making friends with the uneasy sensations that arise during supposed rest frames them not as enemies, but as guides. This subtle shift transforms rest into an ongoing conversation, dynamic and evolving, rather than a static goal to achieve. So next time you feel that urge pushing you away from stillness, consider leaning in with curiosity. There's wisdom in those moments waiting patiently beneath the surface. There was a night when fatigue finally forced me to lie still, yet my chest felt tight as if wrapped in invisible bands. Sleep teased me like a distant shore, close yet unreachable. I realized that the tension I carried wasn't just physical. It was anchored deep in my awareness, an unspoken unease nestled beneath my ribs. In that moment, the quiet desperation to find relief turned into a revelation. Rest cannot be summoned by mere willpower alone. It requires an intricate dance with the parts of ourselves that crave security and trust, elements often eroded by constant alertness. As I lay there, I began to notice how my breath shallowly grazed my lungs, barely touching their depths. Instead of fighting the restraining sensation, I experimented with extending the exhale, imagining a soft river gently washing the accumulated tightness away. Gradually, the constriction loosened, and my heartbeat slowed from a pounding drum to a calm rhythm. This experience taught me how crucial it is to engage in practices that directly address physical signals of unrest, as these often hold keys to unlocking deeper relaxation. It became clear that attending to respiration, posture, and the subtle currents in my muscles opens pathways to relief inaccessible through mental effort alone. Later that week, I met a colleague who described a similar battle with relentless tension, especially during moments designed for calm. She spoke about her tendency to stiffen her jaw whenever lodged in thought, an unconscious armor against vulnerability. We tried a simple experiment: sitting with eyes closed, undoing the jaw lock, and allowing a tiny smile to spread. This small shift instantly softened her expression, and the heavy weight around her temples started to fade. Watching her transformation made me appreciate how minute adjustments to physical habits can ignite profound change in how we feel internally. It's remarkable how often the gateway to peace passes through our carriage and gestures. At another point, while walking through a bustling city park, I observed a street performer playing an intricate melody on a violin. Despite the chaotic sounds, children laughing, cars honking, the music weaved a thread of tranquility through the clamor. Witnessing how skillful engagement with movement and attention could create pockets of calm amid stress sparked a fresh idea in me. Perhaps engaging certain activities mindfully, even in noise, can foster inner ease. It wasn't about escaping stimulation entirely, but redirecting focus with intention, like a captain steering a ship skillfully through turbulent waters. Following this insight, I began practicing purposeful movement sequences, gentle stretches combined with focused breath, as part of my daily routine. Such practices grounded me, allowing tension accumulated in unsuspected pockets, my shoulders, wrists, lower back, to ease. The sensation was less about pushing my limits and more about restoring flow and balance. These moments felt like recalibrations, aligning my internal rhythms to a pace that welcomed rest naturally. This approach quietly demolished the misconception that rest requires complete stillness and inactivity. Sometimes, I found myself frustrated by the endless parade of thoughts racing through my mind during attempts to rest. Instead of resisting, I tried a different tactic: journaling before bed, letting each intrusive idea pour onto paper. This act of externalizing clutter created a container where worries could exist safely without swirling in my head. The relief was immediate. The flood of narratives slowed as I released mental tension into tangible form. This method reaffirmed how engaging the intellect constructively can complement physical approaches to rest, creating harmony between recharge and reflection. On a separate occasion, joining a small group meditation class introduced me to the practice of focusing attention on sensations in my hands: warmth, tingling, lightness. Initially, it felt strange, diverting my mind from busy thoughts to such precise awareness. Yet, over repeated sessions, I noticed a subtle shift. The habitual grip of anxiety loosened, replaced by a gentle curiosity toward my internal landscape. This experience planted a seed of trust that I could meet unsettled moments without panic or judgment. It underscored the power of reconnecting with present-moment experience, even through seemingly simple anchors. During weekends, I began retreating occasionally to quiet coffee shops, not to work, but to observe the ebb and flow of life around me. Watching strangers interact, sharing snippets of laughter or concern, reminded me that rest and unrest coexist universally. I realized that surrendering to my own pace in these bustling environments was radical, a reclamation of personal rhythm amid societal hurry. This external contrast helped me internalize that peace isn't a destination, but a state nurtured through continuous compassionate presence with self. Now, consider how this applies when you face moments of forced rest, when your mind races despite your will to unwind. Instead of battling the flood, what if you welcome these currents as signals guiding you deeper into care? Perhaps the key lies in shifting focus from demanding immediate quietude to engaging senses, exploring gentle movements or tactile experiences, and trusting that rest unfolds through these invitations in time. The journey moves beyond frustration and meets us in the sanctuary of our own evolving responses. Ultimately, I discovered that inviting rest requires creating a personal language of self-soothing, an array of tools attuned to my unique rhythms and vulnerabilities. It's a layered art involving breath, movement, reflection, and presence, woven into everyday moments. This mosaic of practice gently dismantled the tension that once felt insurmountable, enabling peace to take root not as an external gift, but as an intimate cultivation from within. On a day when exhaustion settled into every fiber of my being, I found myself sitting on the edge of a park bench, the weight of restlessness pressing against my ribs like a relentless tide. A figure approached, a small boy, no older than 7, cradling a collection of smooth river stones. His eyes gleamed with quiet concentration as he arranged the stones methodically, forming delicate towers with surprising balance. Watching him, I felt a pang of envy mixed with curiosity. How could he find such calm amid a chaotic world, building castles without a hint of hesitation? It struck me then. True tranquility might be less about erasing all thought and more about choosing where to place our attention. This boy's quiet labor became a metaphor for my own journey. In my lifetime of chasing peace, I had often believed that silencing the mind entirely was the goal, as if peace demanded an empty mind or motionless body. Yet here was evidence that focusing intent gently, with care and playfulness, could invite a kind of restfulness I had never known. I tried to mimic him, selecting moments throughout my day to deliberately arrange my scattered thoughts, letting each fragment settle before turning to the next. It wasn't a fight against mental noise, but a mindful choreography, a way of engaging my mind with softness rather than force. Later, as the sun dipped low and amber light filtered through the trees, an elderly woman wandered by carrying a wicker basket filled with wildflowers. Her movements were unhurried, each step a deliberate blessing of presence. She paused beside the stone towers, smiling knowingly. Sometimes, we forget that peace isn't about escaping. It's about befriending what isn't easy, she said softly, her voice a calm breeze. I was struck by how much wisdom she carried in that simple gesture of acknowledgement. It revealed that the tension I bore wasn't meant to be shoved aside, but invited into the conversation with care and openness. Taking this lesson to heart, I began spending more time outside, allowing the unpredictable rhythms of nature to teach me patience. On a windy day, I leaned against a sturdy oak, feeling its bark's rugged texture beneath my fingertips. The tree wasn't rigid. It swayed and danced, absorbing pressure without breaking. I thought of my own resistance, how holding tight to control only tightened the knots inside. Through the tree's example, I learned a new approach, yielding flexible strength, welcoming movement to ease into renewal. One evening, while preparing dinner, I found myself caught in that familiar loop of worry and shoulds. The kitchen filled with the aromas of herbs and roasting vegetables, the warmth wrapping around me like a soft quilt. Instead of succumbing to frustration, I slowed to notice the textures, the color shifts in the food, the simmering melody of bubbling pots. Slowly, the mental clamor quieted. I realized that fully inhabiting simple acts, touch, smell, sight, became an anchor to present calm I hadn't tapped into before. These moments offered refuge, clarifying that rest can be woven into daily life's flow, even amid busyness. During another restless night, I remembered a technique shared by a friend, telling a worry to take the bus and leave for a while. I whispered aloud, "You can take the next ride, come back later." The absurdity of the phrase drew a reluctant chuckle from me, breaking the spell of severity that often surrounded my thoughts. Humor became a surprising balm, inviting space where rigidity had ruled. I found that giving my mind permission to play with ideas, to entertain lightness, helped counterbalance the intensity of unease. At work, I tried a different strategy. During breaks, instead of scrolling through my phone, I would gaze out the window and mentally trace the flight of a bird gliding effortlessly across the sky. Its graceful arcs felt like a meditation, inspiring me to cultivate rhythm in my own breath. I imagined inhaling deeply as the bird rose, exhaling as it descended into the breeze. This visualization offered a subtle invitation to restore flow within, reminding me that rest is sometimes accessible through imagination and intentional focus, even amid noise and distraction. Another turning point unfolded during a conversation with my partner. I confessed how guilt often overshadowed moments when I stopped moving, as if rest were an obligation to be earned. He listened, then shared his own battles with silent pressure, how he too felt captured by expectations of constant productivity. Together, we brainstormed rituals celebrating stillness without judgment, lighting a candle, sharing silence over tea, promising no plans during pause times. These mutual agreements created sanctuaries where ease was invited gently, transforming rest into a shared experience rather than a solitary struggle. On a weekend hike, surrounded by towering pines and dappled sunlight, I allowed myself to pause frequently, noticing the forest's layered sounds, the rustle of leaves, bird calls, distant murmurs of a stream. Instead of pushing on with goal-oriented determination, I let curiosity lead, marveling at tiny flowers peeking from moss beds or the way shadows played against bark. This approach converted my usual restless steps into a wandering embrace, revealing restoration through presence and surrender to the unknown path, rather than conquest. Throughout these encounters, a pattern emerged. Instead of demanding abrupt silence or forcing surrender, peace whispered through moments where I gently shifted attention to gently held details and simple pleasures. This shift required releasing old battles with perfection and embracing imperfection as part of rest texture. Now, when I sit quietly and my mind buzzes or muscles stiffen, I invite those sensations to become teachers, not adversaries, trusting that steady attention and compassion will gradually soften their grip. I encourage you, next time inner tension refuses to loosen despite your wish to rest, to look for small invitations, whether playful observations, sensory delights, or shared presence, that can guide you closer to ease. Like the child stacking stones or the tree bending without breaking, these moments may uncover paths to calm you haven't considered, transforming rest from an elusive prize into a living, breathing dance within your daily life. Sometimes, when I tried to pause, my body rebelled, insisting on movement even as my mind wanted quiet. One evening, after a long day of back-to-back meetings, I sank onto the couch, hoping exhaustion would lull me into peace. Instead, my legs jittered uncontrollably, tapping rhythms I couldn't control. It was as if my muscles were demanding to discharge currents locked inside, refusing to settle until something gave. I remembered a friend mentioning grounding techniques and decided to explore them, skeptical but desperate. Sitting on the floor barefoot, I pressed my feet firmly against the cool wood, consciously imagining roots growing from my soles deep into the earth. In a few minutes, the restless energy flattened into an earthy calm, like rain soaking into dry soil after a drought. This raw connection to the earth through sensation was a revelation, revealing a path beyond mental effort toward embodied stillness. On another afternoon, I chanced upon a pottery class, a place where hands coaxed clay into shape through patient pressure and receptive touch. As I rolled the wet earth beneath my fingers, I noticed an unexpected shift. The tactile engagement demanded presence, coaxing my swirling thoughts into focus. The slowed, purposeful movements became a refuge, channeling simmering anxiety into creative flow. Rather than fleeing from restlessness, I co-created with it, molding clay as a metaphor for shaping my internal state. This physical artistry exposed a powerful lesson. Engagement with tactile, mindful craft can calm nervous electricity by redirecting it into intentional, grounding expression. The messiness of imperfect pots reminded me that acceptance of flaws extends inward too. It's okay for peace to look messy and uneven. Reflecting on such moments led me to explore how sensory immersion could serve as a gateway to ease. Once while hiking near a lake, I allowed myself to lie back on a bed of moss, my gaze tracing the swirling patterns of clouds. I watched as a chorus of dragonflies darted above the water's surface, their wings whispering tiny breezes I could hardly feel but somehow sensed. Instead of repressing distracting thoughts, I welcomed curiosity about these small, intricate movements, their natural rhythms weaving calm beneath mental tumult. Observing life's minutiae gave me entry points to relaxation even when stillness seemed unreachable. It dawned on me that surrendering into sensory details, the hum of a breeze, the warmth of sunlight on skin, could gently guide me away from internal chaos into a quieter world. Once, during an unusually busy week, I decided to adopt a micro-break habit. Rather than waiting for expansive free time, which rarely came, I promised myself simple pauses, like closing my eyes for 10 seconds or stretching my arms overhead at random moments. These brief interludes functioned like tiny oases, creeping between obligations and fracturing continuous stress. I noticed how this practice chipped away at mounting tension, infusing fresh oxygen into my system. These mini-rests taught me a crucial skill. Peace doesn't require long escapes, but cumulative moments that whisper to our nervous system, "You're safe here." Little by little, these fragments built resilience against the default mode of agitation. On a particularly restless night, when my chest tightened and sleep ebbed further away, I opened my journal. Instead of trying to silence my mind, I let words flow uncensored, spilling worries and fragmented thoughts across pages. Then, I drew a winding river beside the words, illustrating a journey that tough emotions might take if allowed space to move rather than bottling inside. This creative expression transformed frustration into motion and gave emotional energy a release valve. The act of externalizing turbulence with pen and paper became a gentler companion than resistance ever had been. By giving form to my unrest, I found not control but connection, and through that, a seed of ease. One afternoon, a friend invited me to a dance class focused on improvisation. Unsure, I hesitated but agreed. Moving unpredictably, responding to the music's ebb and flood, I allowed my body freedom beyond cognition. Waves of emotion washed in as movement untethered my held breath and rigid posture. I discovered that spontaneous physical expression offers a pathway past the chokehold of overthinking. We sometimes imprison ourselves in restrictive mindscapes, but dancing unlocked forgotten parts inside me. Playfulness, release, catharsis. Emerging from the class soaked in sweat and lightness, I understood that vitality and rest aren't opposites, but complementary rhythms that weave through our being. Now, imagine encountering moments when your body thrums anxiously, refusing to settle on command. Instead of wrestling, what if you redirected your focus onto a physical sensation, a pulse in your wrist, the softness of your shirt against skin? Let your awareness ride those currents, allowing scattered attention to collect like water pooling into a quiet pond. This is not about ignoring tension, but inviting it into your field of care, tending gently until resistance softens. The road to tranquility doesn't run through force, but through curiosity and tenderness toward our felt experience. I've learned that this journey demands patience and creativity. When the mind clamors or muscles tighten, pulling in new tools, crafting moments that invite safety and presence becomes essential. Touch, movement, imagination. These invitations of the body become bridges to an inner refuge where rest is not absent, but transformed. In this evolving dance, peace is cultivated as a living process, woven through our daily rhythms with unexpected grace. Reflecting on this journey we've shared, I feel as though I'm standing at the edge of a vast lake, its surface rippling with fragments of everything that's come before, some moments shimmering softly, others disturbed by uneasy winds. As I peer deeper beneath this shimmering expanse, it becomes clear that the currents beneath are more complex than they first appeared, weaving together the subtle tensions and gentle releases that have threaded through my experience. The tangled dance between yearning for peace and the resistance it sometimes ignites no longer feels like a battle to be won, but as a landscape to explore with care and attention. There's a certain paradox in how the quiet I chased often felt loud, how stillness sometimes echoed with unease. It's like sculpting mist, a shape seeming to take form only to slip and shift just when grasped. I recall moments when attempting to settle was met with an involuntary tightening, as if unseen hands clasped silently around my breath and heartbeats. Yet in those same moments, a whisper suggested that relaxation is less an achievement and more an invitation extended slowly, a fragile bridge trembling over troubled waters. It is this invitation, delicate and persistent, that commands a gentler approach, asking us to slow our expectations, soften our hold, and turn toward the very sensations that feel hardest to face. Walking alongside these currents, the story transforms from a quest for escape into an unfolding dialogue between tension and ease, restlessness and acceptance. The process feels less about erasing discomfort and more about discovering new ways to inhabit it, letting it narrate its meaning without judgment or fear. As seasons shift, I notice how this dialogue encourages patience, allowing fragmented fragments of peace to accumulate like dew catching light at dawn, soft, pervasive, almost imperceptible, yet resilient. There's a rhythmic unfolding here, a natural ebb and flow that teaches me how to dance in harmony with the pulse beneath stillness. I think of the body as a canvas stained by countless unseen brushstrokes, each moment of unease leaving its mark like faint shadows beneath the surface. In embracing those textures, the scattered edges begin to coalesce into a tapestry rich with complexity rather than simplicity. This complexity calls for a nuanced attention that listens deeply, an artful tuning into subtle shifts, gestures, and sighs that speak the language of internal landscapes. It reminds me that peace may reside not in void but in the space held between tension and release, sound and silence, movement and pause. The paradox of presence permeates this journey, the way our focus can be both a source of restless agitation and a graceful conduit toward calm. It becomes clear that the invitation to rest is less about emptying the mind or freezing the body and more about opening a portal through which compassion for ourselves flows. In these moments of attentive presence, I sense a quietly pulsating core of safety, a sanctuary not constructed from absence, but from an active embrace of whatever arises. It is as though the heart learns to build a home within its own beating, a refuge that no external chaos can unmake. This path surprises me with its subtle artistry, the ability to unlace old patterns without force, to weave new textures of ease that coexist with life's inevitable disruptions. It is not a polished finality, but a work in progress, like a garden cultivated over seasons, sometimes wild, sometimes tender, always alive. There's grace in allowing the unpredictability of our internal weather to coexist with the longing for quiet skies, recognizing all as part of an evolving landscape rather than a fixed destination. I invite us to linger in the liminal space where this intricate unfolding occurs, the crossroads between who we were and who we are becoming. It is here, amidst uncertainty and vulnerability, that we encounter the profound courage to redefine familiarity, to rewrite the stories woven through our days and nights. The very act of staying present with what is uncomfortable transforms it, revealing hidden layers of resilience and wisdom that lay dormant beneath the surface tension. As I breathe into this moment, I sense an emerging clarity, an opening not toward a sudden revelation but a gentle awakening. The threads that seem disparate begin to entwine, forming a subtle harmony whispered in the spaces between thoughts, a quiet symphony that invites us onward, into what lies ahead, waiting patiently to be embraced. As days folded into nights, I found myself standing at a threshold between exhaustion and awakening, sensing how elusive peace can be when we expect it to simply arrive. There was a moment, after countless attempts to quiet my mind, when I understood that tranquility isn't a prize handed to us after enduring struggle. It's an art cultivated by tender patience and gentle attention. It's like watching a river carve its way through rock over centuries. The current doesn't hammer or demand. It moves with intention, sometimes rushing, sometimes tenderly slowing, shaping softness into hard edges over time. In those moments of surrender, I glimpsed a new truth. Healing blooms not in swift escape, but through willingness to linger inside discomfort, inviting transformation from within. I remember sitting beside a slow fire, watching embers glow and flicker as shadows leapt around me. The crackling wasn't disruptive. It was a language, a remembrance that even in low light and quiet, life pulses with energy and possibility. The warmth wrapped me in a cocoon of safety, coaxing muscles and spirit alike to ease. It struck me how much I had been chasing an idea of rest untethered to any turbulence, an ideal so perfect it shut out authentic experience. Yet, peace turns out to be more welcoming and porous. It isn't about erasing tension, but folding every fragment of our experience into a wider embrace. Conflict and calm mingle like dusk and dawn, entwined inseparably. Through this unfolding, I came to treasure my body less as simply a vessel to be quieted and more as a wise companion, speaking its truth through aches, breaths, and rhythms. Sometimes my shoulders sang notes of resistance. Other times a deep sigh falling through my ribs spoke volumes waiting to be heard. Listening meant shifting out of frustration and impatience, and instead leaning in with curiosity and care, like learning a language I had forgotten but longed to reclaim. This path called for humility, reminding me that mastery isn't achieved by overwhelming control, but through soft, steady tending. One afternoon, as sunlight dappled through a canopy of leaves, a small breeze stirred and carried a scattering of golden petals at my feet. Kneeling, I traced their delicate edges, marveling at how something so fragile could be both transient and timeless. It made me realize that rest, too, holds paradox. It requires embracing impermanence, accepting waves of unrest to ebb and flow naturally. Rather than clinging or striving to suppress, I learned to welcome these rhythms as messengers guiding me deeper into grace. I'm aware this journey isn't linear or neat. There are days when doubt creeps in, when old patterns pull me toward impatience and the illusion that peace is a distant, unreachable island. But with each breath, I remember this. Progress is woven in persistence, in returning again and again, not to a perfect state, but to openness itself. Our struggles are not malfunctions, but maps, revealing contours of fear and hope alike. In embracing each challenge, we trace a fuller portrait of what it means to be alive. If I speak plainly, the most profound insight I carry is that rest doesn't demand absence of sensation or silence of thought. Instead, it requires an invitation to inhabit what is present, without resistance or rewiring. It's a practice in trust, trusting that beneath waves of tension and unrest, our essence waits patiently. It's a quiet revolution inside ourselves, where healing grows in the softness of acceptance and the courage to be imperfect. That, in itself, feels radical. Our shared human landscape is paved with uneven moments, some thick with agitation, others sparkling with gentle clarity. Walking alongside these fluctuations calls us to embrace an ongoing conversation between effort and surrender, motion and stillness. In honoring this complexity, a new kind of peace emerges, not a distant shore, but an immediate wellspring, available any time we pause to listen deeply and respond tenderly. So when you find yourself caught in restless circles, yearning for calm that slips away, I invite you to remember this. Peace is not a place you arrive at, but a practice you cultivate. It grows quietly amid storms, in the spaces between breath and thought, and is nurtured by patient, loving presence with whatever unfolds. May you learn to hold yourself kindly as you move through this dance, ever turning toward ease with grace, ever open to the surprising ways rest reveals itself in your life.